Gum lesson number 6 is looking at farther and further. It's a difference of one letter in each word, but it can be a huge difference when we're talking about how things are measured. So to start with, when we talk about farther, this one's pretty simple. If we think of distance, any physical distance that can be measured, so like miles, meters, or amount, then we're going to use the word farther. So for example, Mike drove farther for work than he did last year. So we could look at how far Mike drove last year and compare that to this year. And yeah, we can measure that. We can see that. In the case of further, we're talking about metaphorical or figurative distance, which another way to think about this is like degrees. So you can't measure happiness. You can't measure how good something is. There isn't a specific number or value to assign to that. And so in those cases, we use the word further. So for example, in the sentence above there, we have, if any further help is needed, contact me after class. There's no way to measure that amount of help, so that's why we use further. So, like I said, pretty straightforward on these two. To recap then, remember farther, if you think of like how far you can go, think of something that is measurable. It's a physical distance, and further is that figurative distance that's kind of like degrees. It's something that is immeasurable. So when we get to exceptions with these two, it's a little bit tricky. The big thing is that with exceptions is that most people in professional writing or informal writing don't really care. As long as you can't point to one specifically, you're all right. So for example, if I was talking about a book, if I said that I am farther along than you, that works because we can count how many pages ahead I am. But at the same time, if you're trying to talk about how the story develops, there's no real way to measure that. You can't draw a line and say like, yes, this is the distance of that book. It doesn't work. So we can count the amount of pages, or we can talk about it metaphorically, like the distance we travel in the story. So we can kind of mix things up a little bit there. But again, bottom line is, if you can measure it, it's farther. If you can't, it's probably further. And that is farther and further.